This PowerPoint moves on from the growth of organisations to looking at their specific production methods. So this is really looking at those organisations which have some sort of manufacturing base or some sort of processing, as opposed to those sort of service industries, service organisations. So what we're going to look at, it's only a short one, but looking at the different methods of production, and to an extent apply the methods of production to examples that we can think of. So really, when we're talking about production, it's that production of that good and service, and to an extent service as well, but largely, as I say, manufacturing of raw materials into that final product, should we say. So job production, this is an approach to production whereby you are just producing a one-off high quality product. It's very labour intensive. It's got a very high degree of expertise. If you think, for example, works of art, they're only produced, there's only one in the world, they're unique, and for this reason there's a lot of expertise in creating this one. It'll take a long time to produce, and as I say, it's highly quality. So if you look at the positives and negatives that we've got here, they are unique, and for that reason you can charge a high price, which also goes, obviously here, high selling prices, which is negative for the consumer, arguably positive for the producer, but obviously it depends on how much you need to pay for their skills. From a producer's point of view, from a staffing point of view, you could say workers are well motivated because the tasks are interesting, because they're making it from scratch to the final thing. These workers, these highly skilled people, are doing something that they are highly motivated by, they're impassioned by, and they're doing every single stage. So there's a variety of different aspects to the production of this one, and that would make it more interesting. That being said, the downside we also see from a production point of view, the material will be bought in smaller quantities because it's a one-off product. Okay, so therefore you do not get any advantages of bulk buying, economies of scale that we're going to look on later, and also as well because of this lengthy production processes. So the one I always quote is, if you think of Michelangelo, and the Sistine Chapel took 10 years to do. That is an example of job production. It's unique, it's a one-off, high degree of expertise. Couldn't tell you how much it costs, and you can't buy it because it's priceless. Moving on. Okay, so job production obviously doesn't always fit that many organisations. Particularly organisations, if they want to be attracting lots of customers, job production isn't really the way in which you want to go about doing this one. Batch production, on the other hand, is where you start making a number of products, identical products, very good word to use, is homogeneous products in a group or in a batch. You can, because you're producing in a group and a batch, it does also allow variation in the product. So we've got a group of identical homogeneous products in one group. You can therefore, they go through the production process, they're produced, and then they start again, and you can allow variation. So that variation could be a colour, could be a slight adaptation to the shape, it could be part of the ingredient, etc., etc. A common thing for this would be looking at foodstuffs. They very often have batch production techniques. Chocolate bars is a really good example. So when we look at this one, the positive sides, we now start getting machinery as opposed to job production, which was highly skilled, more labour intensive. Now we've got machinery. It tends to be a little bit more quicker, faster, more quality. You could argue the quality maybe higher. There definitely would be less instance of wastage and mistakes being made. However, batches are made, so they're made in higher amounts. You've got to store them somewhere, so that always incurs costs in terms of heating, lighting, security, and somewhere to put them. So producing large numbers lowers the unit cost. Now we start getting into the whole idea of bulk purchasing, economies of scale that we go to look on later. Once you've made one batch, you've got to take it out, reset the machinery if you're changing it, putting a slight variation into it, and that stopping in the production process causes delay, and delay costs money as well. Because of this, you'll be able to pass on lower selling prices to your competitors to your customers, and therefore become more competitive. On the flip side, however, your workers, because we've got this idea of machinery up here, your workers are going to be less motivated, they're going to be less skilled, they're going to be more involved with possibly the automation aspects of the production rather than them being involved in the actual production itself, and that can lead to maybe a little bit of complacency and less motivation. So flipping on, the last one, the last official one is flow production. So this sort of moves on, good word, flows on, producing a huge number of goods simultaneously, okay? It's constantly churning out goods. So this is where we get that whole idea of a production line, something that was developed by Henry Ford way back in the beginning of the 20th century. So what we will see, this is it's ongoing, doesn't stop. It's capital intensive, so what we refer to here is there's lots of machinery. To an extent, there might even be, limited number of workforce. The workforce won't actually be involved in the production process. They will be involved in the automation, okay, in the processing and the programming of the machines and computers, etc. So what we do see from that point of view is with very low labour costs, okay, which is obviously counteracted by machinery. But as we know, the machinery, you've got to pay for it the first time, but after that, hopefully it starts paying itself off. That being said, maintenance and upkeep would obviously be a cost, but I don't think it would be quite as high as labour costs. And machineries don't go sick, they don't need holidays, and they don't need breaks. So all of this stuff is a bit of a heavily advantaged because we've got machines, okay, which is cutting back on these labour costs. Because of that, low cost, cheap selling price, and added to the lower cost, you've also got, furthermore, you're going to buy your materials in bulk, you're going to get economies of scale, which is going to have a knock-on effect for a cheap selling price, very competitive, okay, and because of that, your production levels are going to be very high. However, again, the flip side, if one part of your line, your flow production, stops for literally a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, you're losing lots and lots of money. So if one part of the line stops, everything stops, and that's quite disastrous. From a worker's point of view, it is inflexible, it's incredibly repetitive, and it is very boring work. So you could argue that from a labour point of view, is very negative. But as mentioned before, labour is largely taken place of by machines, so you can say that some people who are employed in doing this will be experiencing this. However, it's not the bulk of the workforce. So we've looked at job, batch and flow. Overall, what we need to be aware of is it's not a case of, okay, this company has to do job, this one has to do batch, this one has to do flow. Companies can choose to adapt their resources or their production methods however they see fit. And very often the most common way that which they do it is they might do a hybrid approach of a mix of 2 or even 3 of the approaches. So basically, it's the choice of which method they use is governed by how productive it is and how efficient it is in terms of getting the most out of their resources. So as mentioned, productivity, we can look at output per workers per hour. So if you're looking at really raising your productivity as measured by this, you're going to employ some form of job production techniques. Okay. But then, that being said, output per hour, output per machine, and your unit costs, all of these things can be measured. So really, when it comes down to looking at the production approaches, it really isn't black and white as to job, batch or flow. Most commonly, we get these approaches which are hybrid, dependent on the type of organisation, the nature of the organisation, what it's trying to do for its stakeholders, and what it's trying to achieve overall.